So I've already done some individual scouting reports at the quarterback position for the 2015 NFL Draft. Make sure you check them out on this channel. I figured it was time now to come on here and give you my final quarterback big board for the 2015 NFL Draft. And you can check that out in the description box down below. And now I'm going to kind of explain to you why I've ranked the players where I have and my overall thoughts about this year's quarterback class. I'll tell you first that all the media talk that is centering around the fact that this is a two-quarterback class with Winston and Mariota. Mariota and Winston is pretty much on the money. This is a pretty weak quarterback class, both lacking in overall talent and depth at the position. It's very surprising to me seeing just how lacking this class ended up being. I thought heading into 2014 that this 2015 class was ultimately going to be better than what it proved out to be. Because even the top two guys, the safest bets to be long-term franchise NFL quarterbacks in Winston and Mariota, they have some major questions about them too. And maybe that's part of the process. We're always going to nitpick everybody. Nobody's a perfect prospect, whatever the case might be. But both Winston and Mariota have questions about them. There are questions about Mariota and his skill set and how his skills will translate to the NFL level and his playing in the spread system, whether that will be a hindrance to him at the NFL level and that transition. And then you have the questions about Winston, especially off the field. But I think part of the thing that gets lost is that Winston also has some questions on the field as well. And that's part of the reason why I make Marcus Mariota my #1 rated quarterback in this year's class. It's not by a huge margin. I'm not going to come on here and be crazy and say Marcus Mariota is going to be far better than Jameis Winston long term. In fact, I believe that both of them will end up being long-term franchise NFL quarterbacks. That's me being positive here. I believe both of them have the right stuff to be able to do so, and I hope for both of their sakes that that's what they end up being, and I believe that they can both be. But I look at Mariota. I think he has more upside. I think he has a higher ceiling. If he reaches his maximum potential in 2 to 3 years, he is going to be a better player than Jameis Winston. When I look at Jameis Winston, a lot of people feel that he is more NFL ready right now as a prospect, and maybe part of that is true. But are you drafting them just for what they could do right now, or are you trying to draft them with 3, 5, 10 years down the road in mind? Also, when I look at Winston, I don't think there is enough being made about some of the on-the-field concerns. This is a guy that threw a lot of interceptions, made a lot of bad, terrible, horrible decisions in 2014. Frankly, with the loss of Kelvin Benjamin, in that offense, he actually regressed some in 2014. I have some real concerns about Jameis Winston, things that he's really going to have to improve upon at the NFL level. I think right now, from an intelligence standpoint on the football field, from a football standpoint, Winston might be a little bit better than Mariota. But if Winston had such an incredibly high football IQ, why does he make so many bad, ridiculous decisions? With that said, though, I've got Marcus Mariota rated as a top 5 prospect in this draft and Jameis Winston ranked as a top 10 prospect. And when I say Jameis Winston is a top 10 prospect, we're talking about like number 6 overall on my board. There's not that big of a separation here, people. So please don't come on here and talk all types of crazy about this or that. I think both of them are going to be just fine, and I think both of them will end up being franchise NFL quarterbacks for the next decade plus. I just happen to be a little bit of a bigger fan of what I see out of Marcus Mariota, and as a result, rank him just a little bit higher. Now, part of the story for this year's quarterback class, as a result with those two guys being so clearly head and shoulders above the rest and with so many other quarterback-needy teams, is who's going to be that number 3 quarterback. And for my money, it's going to be Garrett Grayson out of Colorado State. When I look at him, I see some elements to his game of a Derek Carr. When I look at Garrett Grayson, he's the guy that I project having the best chance to be a starting quarterback at the NFL level, in part because I look at some of the other prospects in this class, like Brett Hundley and Bryce Petty and Sean Mannion, and I see guys that really haven't progressed that much, really haven't improved that much, especially in the case of Brett Hundley and Sean Mannion over the past 2 to 3 years. Here are guys that when I watched them on film in 2013 and came back and watched them in 2014, I felt like in a lot of ways I wasted my time, because their weaknesses were still their weaknesses and their strengths were their strengths, and they didn't really get better in any particular area. And these were guys, all three of them, that I thought were going to do more in 2014 to elevate their draft stock and maybe get themselves into that conversation of either being a later first-round pick or a second-round pick or maybe even a third-round pick. At this point in time, I don't have any of these guys even ranked as a day 2 NFL prospect. I've got both Petty and Hundley as 4th-round prospects, making them day 3 talents, and Sean Mannion is a 5th-round pick. And I wouldn't have thought that heading into this season. I thought these guys were all going to end up ranked higher than they ended up being. There's a couple of sleepers, though, that I do like in this class. I look at Chris Bonner. You're going to say, who? Well, you need to get familiar with him. This is a guy that's almost 6'7", Division II national champion at Colorado State University at Pueblo. Here's a guy that has big-time NFL size. He also has a decent NFL caliber arm. What you really have to like about him, though, if you go watch him on film, you'll know exactly what I'm talking about. This is a guy that really understands when it's necessary to step up in the pocket, and stand tall in the pocket. That's really a good, important skill for him to have. But the great thing about him, though, at being almost 6'7", is he's not a sloth. He's not somebody that has to just make a living in the pocket. This is a pretty good athlete. This is a guy that can extend plays in the pocket with his feet, but just as importantly, can extend plays outside of the pocket and is a threat to throw on the move both to the right and to the left. If he played at a bigger school, if he had more publicity or more name recognition, and he had better talent around him, we'd probably be talking about Chris Bonner, in my mind, in my opinion, as the unanimous number 3 quarterback in this 2015 NFL draft. But based off of what we've seen and the fact that he did play at a Division II level, knowing there's going to be a significant bump up in the level of competition, and he's far from a polished prospect. Right now, I've got him rated as a 4th to 5th round prospect. And he's a guy that if I'm looking at day 3 for a quarterback that I could sit there and draft, that I could stash on my roster for a couple of years and see what happens in 3-4 years, he's the guy that I want to roll the dice on more than anybody else. But there are a couple other guys too. Brandon Bridge from South Alabama. This Canadian is a guy that has that prototype NFL size, that dual threat athleticism that a lot of teams like. He has a strong arm. He needs significant work on his mechanics, and he needs work on his field vision, among other things, and in some ways the comfort level in the pocket. But this is a guy, again, similar to a Chris Bonner that you want to take late in day 3. You want to take him and stash him on your roster for 2 or 3 years and see what he could develop into, see what he can become, because this is a guy with some upside. Again, that's what the draft is about, especially on day 3. You're trying to find guys with upside, guys that you could develop within, guys that could develop into something a whole lot more than their draft position. I think Chris Bonner could be that. I think Brandon Bridge could be that. I even look at a guy like a Tyler Heinecke. In some ways reminds me a little bit of a Brandon Hoyer. Not the best arm in the world, but an okay arm. He can make some big-time throws. He can move on his feet. He's not going to kill you with his athleticism, but he's a guy that can get the job done. And when I look at him and compare him to, let's say, a Shane Carden, I think Heinecke from Old Dominion is a far superior prospect. Some of you are going to ask, well, where's Shane Carden on my big board? He's nowhere to be found. Because here's a guy that I thought was a highly productive college player, but a college quarterback at that, who benefited a lot from the system that he played in and the talent that he played around, namely Justin Hardy. Here's a guy that lacks big-time NFL size, and he lacks big-time NFL arm strength, and, frankly, he lacks NFL accuracy. So he lacks size, he lacks arm strength, and he lacks accuracy. Those are 3 pretty bad things to lack, and he lacks them in relatively big abundance. Just not a draftable prospect in my eyes. Now, a couple other quarterbacks that I have here on my big board, I envision, frankly, having to take a chance and a gamble and converting and changing positions at the NFL level. That's both Cody Fajardo from Nevada and Blake Sims from Alabama. I like both of these prospects. There are things I like about them as a quarterback prospect. And based off of them as quarterbacks, where I have them rated, it would be about where I'd have them rated on a regular big board. With that said, though, I think both Fajardo and Sims are going to have to make the transition to another position at the NFL level. With a Fajardo, some people are probably going to envision him as a Julian Edelman type, and I think that's a really good comparison. At 6'1", this guy's a really good athlete. I mean, a really good, versatile athlete that if you take some time with him and you work with him, he can provide you some punch probably in the return game and as a slot receiver. And you look at Blake Sims. This is a guy I really want to like more. He bided his time behind A.J. McCarron for 3 years. Here's a guy that when he got his opportunity, did a very good job in 2014. He's a guy that I want to rate higher as a prospect. I really do, because there were things about him on film that I really, really liked. But then we also have to be honest with ourselves. He benefited a lot from playing at Alabama. He also is a 24-year-old prospect that is 5'11" with only 1 year of starting experience. How much is that really worth to an NFL team? You have to factor that in when you're evaluating a prospect. And as a result, to me, from a quarterback standpoint, that makes Blake Sims pretty much undraftable. A guy that you're taking a chance on as an undrafted free agent that you're trying to stash on your practice squad. He's 24, 5'11", and inexperienced. So if you take 2 or 3 years to work with him and develop him, he's already going to be in his late 20s, and he's still going to be 5'11". That matters. You can talk about Russell Wilson all you want, but Blake Sims is nowhere near the prospect that Russell Wilson was coming out of Wisconsin. And even I will acknowledge that I was dead wrong about Russell Wilson at the NFL level. But that doesn't mean that I'm going to overrate Blake Sims, because those are some simple truths that we have to look at here. 24 years old, 5'11", not very experienced, played on a very good Alabama team with a lot of help and a lot of talent around him. How would Blake Sims really work if he didn't, let's say, have Amari Cooper to throw the ball to, or TJ Yeldon and Henry to hand the ball off to? With that said, though, he's a guy maybe like a Denard Robinson that could be deployed as a wide receiver / running back type of hybrid athlete at the NFL level, and could be a productive NFL role player. And that's why I still have him rated as a 6th-round prospect. Even though I'm listing him here on the quarterback big board, he's really not a quarterback prospect the way I look at him. But again, this is a pretty weak quarterback class. Even the top 2 guys have questions about him, and big-time questions about him. There's only 9 draftable quarterback prospects the way I see it. I thought this quarterback class was going to be a whole lot better than what it was. Now, I'm hoping that I'm wrong, and I'm hoping one of these other guys outside of Mariota and Winston could develop into a long-term NFL starter. And I think at least one of them truly can. I think the one most likely to at this point would be Garrett Grayson. But again, when you look after those top 2 quarterbacks, there is a significant drop-off in both talent and upside when projecting these other prospects to the NFL level. If you're a quarterback-needy team this year, you better either hope you're in position to draft Mariota or Winston, or you better hope your mid-round gamble on somebody like a Grayson, Petty, Hundley, Bonner, or Mannion's going to pay off, or you better just cross your fingers, roll the dice this year, and hope that things look better with the 2016 NFL quarterback class.